Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my cabin down by the creek. So, today we're talking about how we can end the war in Ukraine. Is there an end in sight for the Ukraine Russian war? Well, it looks like Zelensky has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire, and the ball is now in Russia's court. We're going to look deeply into that. We're going to look at some of the genius moves that President Trump has made to bring about these changes and what a future peace in Ukraine and Russia might look like. But before we get started, I want to encourage you all to support this channel with your financial contributions. You know, I'm a one-man operation. Your gifts and donations to this channel simply go to make sure I keep the lights on and I have the basic things I need to survive. Because you're basically buying me time. When you make a gift to the channel, you're purchasing time for me so I can spend it making content for you and delivering these videos. So if you find them interesting, entertaining, enlightening, inspirational, then please be a financial contributor to ensure that the channel stays going and that I have the time it takes to do all the research and writing and production it takes for one man to produce these videos on YouTube. So you'll find links in the description below to help me on that. And mid-month bills are here and I'm short, so I really need some help. So thanks to all of you who can contribute. Now, it looks like we might have a peace deal coming out of the Ukraine-Russian war. You see, Zelensky, as we all know who've been paying attention, threw a little mad fit, and there was a little tussle in the Oval Office over this topic. And Donald Trump had to play hardball with Zelensky. He pulled all of the military funding for Ukraine. And more importantly than that, he turned off the spigot of intelligence information that was fueling their war efforts in this fight against Russia. And in doing so, it put them in a very vulnerable position. And Zelensky had no choice but to bend the knee to the will of the American people through the mandate we gave Donald Trump to end this war. And but he didn't want to. Why was he so resistant? Why does it seem, or why is it obvious that Zelensky wants to continue this war? Well, if we get the ceasefire, which he's already agreed now, that's the headline, he's agreed to a 30-day ceasefire and the ball is now in Russia's court. But the reason he was resistant to that, the reason why he may be tempted to break the ceasefire, is because he has declared martial law since the beginning of this war. And in doing so, he suspended the elections. You see, Zelensky is a somewhat unpopular character. And if the elections were held tomorrow, he would more than likely be replaced by a more moderate voice in the Ukrainian government who would like to bring this protracted war to an end. You see, they burned through a bunch of our money, all of their own money, and most of their young men in Ukraine fighting this war. They've gone to conscripting people by dragging them out of their cars at intersections and putting them on the front lines, by kidnapping people out walking their dogs and chasing them down and forcing them into military service. And the idea of Ukraine being able to continue this war for several more years is highly unlikely. It's nearly impossible. Will be nearly impossible without any foreign troops getting involved, which means World War III. It's an escalation. And Donald Trump, under this mandate from the American people, has set out to end this war. And so he forced Zelensky to the table. And now the ball is in Russia's court. And you know, if you haven't been following this, you may not be aware of the role that these rare earth minerals are playing in this negotiation. How rare earth minerals might be the secret to ending the Russian-Ukraine war and building a lasting peace and establishing a greater relationship with the Russian Federation that would benefit both countries and prevent future conflict. And it all revolves around rare earth minerals. So what are rare earth minerals? It's a handful of very rare minerals found in the earth. I know it sounds obvious, but these minerals are a key component to our modern world. Russia is third in the world in possession of these rare earth minerals that are untapped. They're still in the ground. And part of why Russia is so far behind on developing these is that they don't have a particular use for them themselves. Russia is more of an industrialized nation, and they haven't gone down the high-tech road like the rest of the world has. So these rare earth minerals are used in wind turbines, they're used in electric vehicles, they're used in LCD screens like the one you're probably using to watch this video. And a lot of our technology, from cell phones and computers to everything you can imagine, are now reliant on these very rare minerals. China has more of them than anyone else, and they have cornered the market because they are technologically savvy and they are very involved in the tech world. And so China has been holding the rest of the world hostage by being in control of these rare earth minerals. And part of Donald Trump's desire to be independent is to break down those monopolies. And one way to do that is to get our hands on the rare earth minerals that are in eastern Ukraine, which is the area where the war's been going on. But there's the most of them to be found still untapped are in Russia. And Russia would like them to be utilized. There's a huge financial boom to the Russian people if they can set up the mining of these rare earth minerals. They just don't have the expertise. They don't have the capital, and so Donald Trump is working out a sweetheart deal with Russia to get them to come to the table and end the Ukrainian war and find a compromise that suits both sides, so that these rare earth minerals then can be mined out of Ukraine and Russia to the benefit of the United States and financial benefit to Russia. This is a genius move to use the need for rare earth minerals to accomplish a few things: to handicap China and end its exclusivity and control of these rare earth minerals, to end the war in Ukraine, right? And to build another source, a diversified source, through the deal we make with Ukraine and the deal we're making with Russia for these minerals. And Russia then has a motivation to give up some things, to come to the negotiation table and be reasonable, because these rare earth minerals are a financial boon for the country and could help take them to the next level economically. And of course, that's very appealing to Putin, who's really worried about the strength and power of the Russian Federation. Less important to Zelensky, who's mainly about trying to maintain power. That if the election were held today, he would be replaced. If he gets this ceasefire and a lasting peace, he'll have to end martial law, and the elections will be right on the heels of that. And he's more than likely to lose the election in a big way. So he's not really that motivated, because I hate to say it, but it appears that Zelensky is not interested in what's best for his country, but is interested in the best way he can maintain power and his authority and position. But I do believe Zelensky's on the way out, one way or the other, because he's standing in the way of progress. And, France has made some big statements about funding the war and sending troops into the war. And all of these would escalate the war in Ukraine to World War III. If the French decide to do that, it could be very detrimental. However, Macron, who is pushing for this, is in power right now, but all of his opposition are opposed to it. And they're making open statements opposing future involvement in the war in Ukraine. And I think after so many millions of people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people combined from both sides of this war, have lost their lives. 3 generations of Ukrainian men are gone forever. I estimate that the next big fad in America will be Ukrainian mail order brides, because there are no husband prospects in Ukraine, because they've all been killed in this war. And the war has to end, or there will not be a Ukraine. And America is done sending more Ukrainians into this meat grinder. We're certainly not going to send our troops into this meat grinder, and France would be foolish to engage in such a thing. And I think ultimately the Ukrainian people would like to see an end to it. War is hell, and they said that for a reason, because it is. And it's hell on a country. It's been hell on Russia. It's been double hell on Ukraine. And the United States wants nothing of it, despite the clear saber rattling by the leftists in Congress and the neocons, which are just leftists in disguise. These people have been pushing for this war because they want to unseat Putin. And this is why Zelensky was so resistant at the meeting at the Oval Office, why he showed us some attitude, because for the last several years, really since Biden took office, he's been selling, he and his people in his cabinet and in control of the left side of the aisle, and even some people on the right, like Lindsey Graham, have been pushing this idea that we want Ukraine to fight Russia so they can then have a regime change in Russia. And the American people are done with that. Donald Trump sees the folly in it. He's done with it. And it appears that he is using some brilliant economic strategy to bait both sides and bring them to the peace table. And he had to play hardball with Zelensky to get him there, but he's agreed to the ceasefire. Russia will agree next, as long as this doesn't include a peacekeeping force of NATO troops. That there's some hard lines they're not going to cross. They don't want any foreign troops in Ukraine. They don't want any United Nations peacekeeping forces that would include NATO members. So if there was a peacekeeping force sent there from the United Nations, the Blue Helmets, they would need to be from other countries, potentially Turkey's part of NATO. I mean, where do you go? Brazil, maybe? I don't know where they would come up with this peacekeeping force. But as long as it doesn't include NATO forces. They also are never going to agree to peace unless we can say that Ukraine will never be a part of NATO. This is going to be one of the sticking points. There's a lot of negotiation left, but the benefit that both sides can get from developing their rare earth minerals could make both their nations rich. And ultimately, when money's flowing and jobs are flowing and everybody's doing well, nobody wants war. War usually comes out of some form of desperation. So this development of rare earth minerals is a way of removing some of the desperation from both sides and giving them a positive benefit to embracing peace. Now, the negotiations are going to stick on foreign troops and peacekeeping forces. They're going to be hung up on things like how much territory. Ukrainians have said, we're not giving away any of Ukraine. If that's on the table, we'll fight to the last man. That's ignorant. I'm sorry. That's an ignorant way of looking at things. You've essentially already lost this war. Without the United States, you'll lose this war immediately. It'll be over. And they know that. And so they're going to have to give up some territory. And Russia has clearly stated that they want all of the territory that they have claimed through all of these years of fighting now, that they want what they have rightfully earned through war. And they don't intend to give back the eastern portion of Ukraine that they currently occupy. Now, if you recall, a few months back, it was big news when Ukraine invaded Russia in the Kursk region. And they've been able to hold that region for months in a World War I type trench warfare standoff. And the battle lines in Kursk have been stalemated for some time. And it's just this network of trenches and defensive infrastructure. And nobody has gained or lost any territory there for a very long time. But that all changed recently when Russian special forces infiltrated behind the Ukrainian army lines to attack them from behind by cutting into a gas pipeline, putting on essentially what looks like scuba gear, and crawling on their stomachs through pipelines barely big enough to fit a human being through until they got underneath the Ukrainian line and were able to pop up on the backside of the Ukrainian line in Kursk. And they broke the stalemate. And now the Ukrainian army is being routed from the Kursk region. Russia has announced that for the most part, they've won back the Kursk region. And there is also, though, some really bad, whether it's propaganda or true, some really dark stuff coming out of the Kursk region that's been reclaimed. Russia claims they found torture chambers where Russian citizens, non-combative citizens, civilians, have been being tortured and killed by the Russian army in torture chambers, that they found dead civilians and the evidence of torture chambers. And, that's going to feed the public opinion in Russia. It probably lost the Ukraine some support, even amongst allies, since that's something that is deplorable no matter how you look at it, if it's true, if it's in fact true. And so originally, the thinking was, when we first started talking about ending the war in Ukraine, that potentially some of this territory in eastern Ukraine occupied by Russia would be given back in exchange for the Ukrainians leaving the Kursk region of Russia. But now with this expulsion, it looks more and more like Russia is going to stand its ground and demand the eastern part of Ukraine. And Ukrainians are going to be hard-pressed to accept such a deal. But at the same time, both sides can be levered. And you got to admit to the brilliancy of Donald Trump on this, that because the Ukrainian deposits are in eastern Ukraine and Russia is so rich in rare earth minerals, that whether eastern Ukraine ends up being Ukraine, then we still get the deposits, right? We get the rare earth minerals. But if they lose the negotiation and eastern Ukraine becomes Russia, and we got to deal with Russia, we still get the deposits, although to a lesser degree of profit, right? We were taking the lion's share when dealing with Ukraine. It'll have to be more fair when dealing with Russia. But Russia wants this development of this untapped resource. And Donald Trump, being aware of that, is using economic power to head World War III off at the pass and end this war in Ukraine. And I think, for one, it's brilliant. I don't think people are recognizing it yet. I think even the talking heads who see him making the deal for the minerals in Ukraine don't realize he's also making a deal with Russia for their minerals. And the result is win-win for the United States. The end of the war, the end of the threat of World War III, and a new economic era for all three nations involved, where we become wealthier, and it trickles down to the working class until we have an economic boom in all three countries. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Is this economic brainstorming, this economic powerhouse way of thinking that Donald Trump's bringing to the table, is it 4D chess? Is this the next and more appropriate way to deal with foreign powers through economic control? We'll talk later in another video this week, hopefully, about what's going on with the Canada tariffs and the Chinese tariff, how he's using those same methods even to deal with enemies and allies alike, to get a fairer deal for America and to make America wealthy again. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to support the channel, and thanks for coming out to my cabin down by the creek.